Bum, 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 bum. All right. YouTube is telling me that I'm live. So I must be live. Good afternoon. This is some actually hot instant milk tea. It's from a powder. Somebody gave it to me. I can actually make this stuff. I have the to make the, I guess, the kind of classic milk tea. I have the ingredients, but I got these powder packets. I'm just gonna run it through them. I'll let it cool down a little bit more because I don't want to be slurping too much on the air because it's hot. Hot, hot, hot. Last night, I ran the One Ring. If I actually streamed a bit yesterday, prepping for that session, so I thought I could go through it, talk about it, and chat about some things I'm learning about the system. I think so. First of all, as a group, and right now we've got there's basically five of us. The one person's only gone the first session. So of this group, we've played 3 games. I played in one. I ran the other. I ran the next 2. One of the players who played in that first session has yet to play in any session after that. It's early days. I don't want to say that they're kind of dropping away, but it happens. Whether it happens in this case, I'm not sure. I don't think it's something to do with me. I mean, they didn't even couldn't drive them away through play since they didn't play, and they haven't said anything like I'm dropping out. But you almost get the sense, or at least the rest of us gotten the sense that maybe they are going to drop away. And they were the one. I don't know if I mentioned it when I talked about those other sessions or that other session on my other channel. They weren't a great fit. They were probably the person who had the kind of the least. I don't want to say understanding, but maybe they weren't quite in the same vibe of Middle Earth, of the kind of Tolkien universe as the rest of us were. So it wouldn't surprise me if they left, but they had a good time on that one session, and they haven't said anything that makes me think that they're not coming back. But in any case, it's been 3 players in GM for these last 2 sessions I ran. So was lucky enough that last night, same 3 players who played in the first part of the session played last night. We're playing through the name of the adventure, which is, and I have here on the shadow, but I'll go forward. I'll zoom up here to show and of course spoilers, I guess, for this. It's called The Star of the Mist. It is an intro, what they call a landmark, which is basically like a little self-contained scenario. I think the write-up here is maybe 4 or 5 pages, including some art. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, actually, it's more like 9 pages, actually. Though some of it, this one in particular, it's kind of a tutorial style, or not style, but they give you some extra information. I think it's probably good if you're interested in the One Ring to look at this in terms of just seeing. Oops, my camera went out. Hold on a minute. Camera, you fool. Ugh, why are you doing that? Why are you doing that to me? I was doing this the other day. It didn't do it yesterday. Now it's doing it again today. Can I get it to turn off? I don't want you to go off, but I can't seem to figure out why you're doing that. What was I going to say? Okay, so that's back. Where was I? Oh, so you got these scenarios. I think it's good to see kind of how they're doing it. It's a fairly linear affair, though. I don't think that difference between kind of linear and a railroad, right? When you talk about a railroad, you're saying it as a pejorative term. It's something that's a railroad. It's awful, and that's the railroad is when you really feel that linearity, where the linearity of the adventure is constricting enough that you feel it. That you feel it there. Hey, I'd like to do something. It's like, nope, I can't because it's off that rail. It's like you're on a very narrow band. I mean, there is no. If you imagine, I don't know if you've seen in the amusement park, you see those rides. They're like the little kiddie. It's like the kids who aren't old enough for real bumper cars or real driving. They'll put them on a car, and the car is on a rail, but it's got some wiggle room, so they can kind of turn left or right, so they can kind of make it move around more, or it's on, so it's got some, it almost feels like when you're in the car, it's got some give to it. Oh, I can do, you can't really go outside the course, but you feel like you got some latitude to, oh, I can do this and I can do that, right? It's that kind of illusion. I'm not saying they're trying to be deceptive or anything, but I think that difference between maybe being linear with being a railroad is when the railroad you are locked in. You're on a train. That train doesn't have any give to it. It's on the rails or it's flopped off the track, and that's awful. It's on that rails. Whereas sometimes you have some leeway. Oh, look, I can do some driving. I can turn here. I can turn there. But you can't. There's a certain band of movement that you're sort of allowed or you're encouraging to do. And this scenario, I would say, is somewhat linear. Though that's fine because some things are basically linear. Some things in life are linear. You're a messenger and you're saying, deliver this package to this place. That's essentially a linear thing, but that's the job. So deliver the package. But of course, in delivering the package, you have a lot of latitude in, well, which streets do I take? Which way do I go? Do I try to minimize traffic? Do I try to make it easy, right? You have a lot of decisions there, even though the ultimate path is kind of linear. And I think the same way this adventure, it is pretty linear. Go to a space, check it out, go to the next space, check it out, sort of explore and figure out kind of what's going on and sort of deal with that and then leave, which is kind of a linear. There's not a lot of like, oh, branching, not really. But I think when you're in it, and I feel like the players have felt it. They didn't say anything as much, but one, they've been really enjoying the scenario. So one of the things that they really enjoyed the session last night, they were like, one of the guys gave me a handshake. He's like, oh, this was really good. I really enjoyed it. The other two were like, oh yeah, it was really great. And they were kind of talking about it in a very positive light. So I feel pretty confident saying that they did not feel hemmed in by the fact that this is a fairly straightforward, linear, hey, go to this place, check it out, go here, check it out, kind of figure it out sort of thing, which is basically A, B, C. Essentially, it really could have even been just kind of A to B, more or less. So let me just take a sip here. For the working man, apologies for the slurps. So it's linear, but it doesn't feel railroad because you have lots of choices. And I think that's, I still don't know. I'm still not necessarily sold on the journeys, but I think one of the things that the journeys does is even though you can say what you will about what you're actually doing mechanically. Oh, you're going to just roll some dice. You're going to kind of, in a way, it's doing the kind of travel where it's a little montagey. And when you're rolling those dice, it's kind of like you're setting up, well, how many little montage moments, how many clips in this montage am I going to have between when I leave home and I get to my destination? Depending on your navigation skill, you might have 3, you might have 5, you might, whatever it is. And then, okay, what are those moments look like, right? And I don't know if it's for me or not necessarily, but the fact is that as players, you still feel like, regardless of what the mechanics are telling you, I think the idea that you get to look at this map and you get to plot out, as the party did in part 1 of the session before this, oh, how do you want to get from Bree here? Oh, it's quicker, but it might be more dangerous. We want to, this way. You still feel like you have choices. In the same way, once they got to this area, which is in this spur of the Blue Mountains, and you get in, there's kind of you get to this dwarven ruin that's sort of on either side of a ravine, and there's a broken bridge, and there's a little bandit camp, and there's some things going on. Even though if you plot it out, it's like, well, you're just following on the straight line. It feels like, okay, like, what do you want to do? Like, they give you a lot of choices in kind of what you can do, how you want to do it. And as I mentioned yesterday, in the kind of prep about this, is that the throwing in the elements of the shadow, which I did a lot of shadowing last night. It even gives you more of, as a player, I think it puts more of an onus on you to figure out, well, there are the most, especially in a D&D kind of sense, they're the most optimal ways we could play this. But those might be the most shadowful ways to play it. And how that emerged in the previous session was and I didn't, this was a teaching moment for all of us, because when the incident actually happened, we hadn't really thought about shadow. It was only afterwards when I remembered a bit the text, and they said, oh, if they just kind of ambush and kill them all, that's kind of a shadow moment. And afterwards, like, oh, shoot, we should have talked about this. I'd like to give you guys shadow. Like, what do you think? And they were all, to their credit, and they were all like, oh yeah, let's do it. Because they really, we really want to get into the game. And that's an enthusiasm that I'm really appreciating, is they really want to, like, all of us want to, like, play the game, learn the game, do everything. So if we miss something, the players are most likely to say, like what happened last night was I was rolling for an enemy and I got a Sauron on the die. And I said, "Oh, they missed. It's a Sauron." And then someone was like, "No, I think for you, when you're rolling for the enemies, Sauron is the crit, the good, like the Gandalf. It's the crit success for them, and Gandalf is crit fail." And they were like, "Oh yeah, that's really no, that's what it should be." It's like, okay, and it ended up ended up being fairly detrimental to players, but they were all into it because they're like, "Oh yeah, it should be that way." They were like, "That's how it should be." It felt right to them that the enemy should get the benefit of the Sauron, of the eye coming up. And when we looked it up in the rules, sure enough, that is in the rules. But it was just the way everyone just kind of came together. Was like, oh yeah, like even though it was, like I said, it was not to their benefit at that moment. It was like, yeah, you should totally do that. So that was really good. But you get in these moments when you're playing through, or when they're playing through, right? I feel like the situations, there are lots. You have nice spaces for decision making. Maybe that's the best way to put it. Even though you don't, on a macro level, you pull back, you're like, yeah, that's pretty much straight line, A, B, C. You zoom in, there's no, it feels like you have things to do. And I don't know that's necessarily a system thing. I mean, probably every adventure that's any good, or just whatever, I don't know at what point. Well, I mean, I've been in parts where I felt the railroad, so I, I could say like, oh yeah, you get to some one direction, like, yep, where someone's literally hemming you in into a path, right? And I definitely wasn't doing that, but that I think they felt like that they were really operating in the space, as opposed to kind of just going through like a very linear set. Um, I was doing a lot of shadow. I'm still. It seems like I'm trying to. Sometimes I just me, because I'm new to the system, and I am trying to. I'm not in that space yet where I'm comfortable enough to just start winging it, right? So I'm still trying to see like, well, what am I supposed to be doing? And depending on how you feel about all the stuff, some people would be like, well, just do what you want anyway. It's like, no, I kind of want to. I kind of want to understand the way the game is sort of balanced, if you will, before I start monkeying with it. I was dropping lots of shadow on them, and so they're in a really precarious spot right now. Even though they're mostly done with things, they're not quite done. They're they're really at those brinks that between where they're, a couple of them at the end of this thing are miserable, which is when their shadow and their hope meet. So basically, you have hope and you have shadow. Hey, Croco, your hope starts out high and your shadow starts out low. I mean, at least in your first adventure. And then hope you can spend to do things, usually give you extra dice. And then as you're experiencing the kind of darkness of the world, sort of moral darkness and things, right? The horrors of things, you start to gain shadow. When they meet, you become miserable. When you become miserable, a few things click in. So when the players are rolling dice and they're rolling at Sauron, and remember the special dice, and I'll just show this because this is kind of funny. Somebody mentioned in a comment, I think I've mentioned this before, but I'll show off the die. Someone mentioned in a comment there was a typo in the first printing of the box set, where the dice you got had, instead of having 1 to 10, it had 11, and my die has that die. So it goes 2 to 11, like a normal D12, or, normal D12, as opposed to, it's because it's supposed to be 1 to 10, Sauron, which is 0, right, and then Gandalf, which is the crit. But I actually have the I've got the my version has the 11. It's just a little kind of side thing. It's just kind of funny. In any event, when you become miserable, I believe that's the point when when you're just kind of full power, you roll a Sauron, your die is 0, which is bad because it's your D12. It's you're trying to pass certain threshold numbers. And it's a D12 and the number of D6s. So if you're not very skilled at something, that D12, if you have to pass 14, you really got to roll high on that D12 and hope that D6, where you got to roll like 8 or more, and whatever. It's like that D12. It's gonna be a big chunk of how you're getting over these threshold numbers. So when you roll Sauron, it's not even just a 1; it's like a 0. It's like nothing, but it doesn't do anything. It's not a crit fail. When you become miserable, then it starts to crit fail. I think some other things might grow. And there are a couple different statuses, and I got to remember them all. I think it's miserable is the one. So there's a couple of the players who have passed that miserable threshold now. So now those Saurons they've been getting that before were like they stunk because then they couldn't, they basically got zeros on their D12s, but they might be able to succeed otherwise if they have a lot of dice and skill. If they used hope, they might be rolling 3, 4. I don't think anyone has more than, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 D6s. If you have a low threshold, like it's a 12, you still have a pretty good chance of making it, even if your D12 if you got the Sauron. But now it's like you could have all that, you could have all the dice in the world. You roll that Sauron and you're kaput. So you kind of have that sort of 1 in 12 fail situation. Krako says, roll a Sauron down a hill, win a ring. I suppose. I don't know if you would make that bet, but I suppose you could do that. So by anything, we got a couple of miserable people. One of them took a wound. One of the other ones took a deadly wound, but this is where that Sauron actually came in. So here's how close it was for them at one point. Is they're fighting the threshold number. So it's really cool. It's a little bit extra work, but there's a real tension to it. So the way they do kind of crit damage, I guess, in sort of an interesting way. If you're rolling a 10, I guess the Gandalf doesn't count. I think you have to roll a natural 10. Anyway, there's a couple ways you can get this piercing blow. Maybe on a Gandalf you get it too. That's one of the things, just before I get into this, having not played in 2 or 3 weeks now, and it's not a system that's just imprinted on my brain like something like BX is. Like, there was a lot of me, especially at the beginning of the session, kind of fumbling to try to get back in the swing of how everything works. I think some of the other ones were too, and that's another reason it was really nice where everyone's kind of working together on the rules. Was that there were times where I'm like, oh, what is it again? Is it this? Is that? I had to really kind of look it up and kind of get things down again. In any case, however you get there, if it's a 10 and a Gandalf, whatever, this piercing blow. And so what happens is weapons have a damage number, and you don't roll for damage; it's a flat damage. And then if you get piercing, then now the enemy has to roll versus a target number. And I think we established it's meet or beat. So if it's, say, 14, now you have to roll 14, and you get to roll. So this is where your armor comes in. So armor doesn't impact your normal damage. But what it happens is when you get one of these, you're rolling your D12 again, and now you're rolling extra dice depending on your armor. And what you need to do is you need to beat that target number, otherwise you pick up a wound. And I think the wounds are very interesting, and we have one of the players has a wound. Their character has a wound. So what happens is then, okay, now you have a wound. The wound has a certain healing time, so it's in effect for a number of days. And when you're they're in a location, right? They don't have days off. So essentially, once you pick up that wound and you're in the adventuring location, you're going to have that. You're on that wound for the rest of at least that foray. And it's not OSR style. You're not like, oh, I'm going back to town and come back. They're nowhere near town. They're not. They're kind of on the outside of the Shire, sort of at the edge of the Blue Mountains. There is no like, oh, we could just go back. Like, I don't know. I haven't looked up for rules for resting, whatever. But it's pretty much like you've just got that wound, and you can have, once you get a second wound, you're dying. So it's like this first one's like, aha, you've got it. The second one's like, oh, now you're dying. And the other thing is there's severity of the wounds. And so what happened was this player, they rolled a Sauron. So they're trying to roll to avoid a wound, and they rolled a Sauron on the wound. So it was like, okay. And then they said like, oh, and they're trying to add it up. And at first they're like, they got ahead of themselves. The first like, oh no, I Sauron, so I failed. And then they rolled again. You roll again to see what the severity is. And then they rolled like, I guess was it a Sauron again? They got something that was like, now they're dying. So they were, and they're like, oh no. And then I'm like, and then I'm thinking they're calling out numbers like, oh, I got 14. I'm like, wait a minute, and I'm trying to reel back. I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Like, what did you get in the first roll? You got 14. Okay, 14. And I was like, remember Sauron, they weren't miserable. So I'm like, okay, you're not miserable. So Sauron doesn't make you auto fail. It's just 0. And you say you got 14 and counting the 0 from your D12? And like, yeah, that's what I got. Because they'd thrown some hope in and whatever. Like, okay, like you just made it. The number was 14. And I'm like, I think it's meet or beat. And then someone verified it and that it is meet or beat. It's like, okay, you're not dying now. And actually you avoid the wound. But it's a neat system. I mentioned in the first session they fought a troll, or no, not in the first session. In the first game we played, the game that I didn't run, this idea of you have something like a troll has a ton of hit points, their endurance. So you're trying to whittle it down. Its endurance, you're going to be there all day, and it hits hard. But if you can get wounds on it, it can only take, I think, 2 wounds or 3 wounds. So it's kind of neat. So, you get these crit hits have a real effect both sides on the battle. So that was kind of really, really neat. So the wounds, I like the wound system. Again, there isn't like you have some extra steps, but the combats are pretty quick. What we found so far, we're fighting against limited numbers. I think with the most we've had is 6. They were fighting the 3 of them, I think, against 6 combatants. These kind of undead type deals, and it took maybe 2 rounds or 3 rounds before it was over. So having that extra bit dealing with the piercing blows doesn't take very long, and there's a lot of fun tension. Either the players are doing it, so it's like they're hoping, obviously they're hoping you miss. Like when we got those wounds on the troll, it was real like like we really needed it, because otherwise we're thinking like this, if we got to just go just back and forth, a battle of attrition, we're just going to lose. That was just the fact of it. Whereas those wounds were really turning the tide. And so I was like, oh, like that was really, really cool. And in that, and so now, though, I think that's the one character now who's not miserable. So we have 2 miserable characters. One's a dwarf who's a miserable dwarf, and the hobbit is also miserable. The hobbit also has a wound, and the elf, they're just above, though they took a shadow scar. I got to read up on how those work again. So I guess getting into the kind of, those are sort of the highlights just kind of the sort of playing with shadow. And so this is, I guess the other thing is, I don't know whether I'm doing it right or not, for whatever that means. But I was handing out a lot of shadow. When like the undead things, they fought them like, take a shadow, right? Oh, this happened, take a shadow. They had a couple of goofs and like they were trying to, so I guess I'll get into it. So in this, they had dispatched the bandits that were camped. There was a broken bridge that had a ramp going across it, but a couple of the bandits had escaped, and they had basically destroyed the ramp behind them. So now there's this broken part they need to go across. Now I did reveal it to them because we're still learning things. And I said that, like, they're asking, well, how far across is the gap? And I was like, something like 20 feet. It's pretty big. But the elf has something called a magical success, where they use hope and they can kind of do something sort of, magical elf stuff. So they could kind of get across. They could do like I don't know, because they're lighter than air, because they're made of helium, whatever it is, they can kind of float across a little bit, kind of a Legolas kind of thing, where he's like in the books that I think they did one of the maybe underrated moments in the movies. I know people get on all the crazy stuff Legolas did, but they did a good job in the movie of showing when they're on, before Moria, when they're on Carathras, in which everyone's just slogging through snow that's up their chests, and Legolas is just walking on top of the snow, not falling through. And it's kind of a similar, they're giving them sort of similar thing like that, where in a sense they get a little bit of, you almost want to call it like the little Matrix kind of thing, where they can't, some rules can be bent, right? So like, Morpheus can jump higher and do things because he can kind of bend the rules of the Matrix. Maybe it's a little bit of an elfin, we can sort of bend the rules of the world a little bit to do little jumpy things. And because we knew about it, and we didn't, I was like, oh yeah, this thing, I think like if you use a magical success or whatever, you can do that. You have to spend hope though, which is a limited resource. And they were spending a lot of hope in this session, which I think is good. I think that's that, as I mentioned, it was Call of Cthulhu, right? You want that sanity and luck, and you want that stuff all to be kind of in play. And this session, for sure, all that stuff is in, because they got down there and they started picking up shadow, and they're using a lot of hope, and sometimes they're using hope to avoid getting shadow, to try to. And by the end of the sessions, like, they were on this kind of knife's edge of and some of them passed into kind of miserableness, they got wounds, and so they were really feeling the impact. And it's only been like in this entire, and granted, it's taken now 2 sessions and we're not quite done. There's only been, I guess, 3 combats, and one of them, they routed those bandits. They came in, surprised them, rained death from above, jumped down into their midst. One of them ran off, and the rest died. I don't even know if I got like they even had a chance to answer the blows that were rained down on them. They just were toast. So in terms of substantial conflicts, maybe just 2. Those 2 were harsh. Cargo says, I find the hope shadow juggling to evolve a lot into meta discussion. I mean, they were definitely talking about, I'm not someone who minds that. I mean, not that it wouldn't be cool if they were talking about it in character kind of thing, but I think, yeah, I mean, you definitely start to think about like, oh my gosh, like I can't, I'm getting down to it, but I like it because they're just, You think about it, I always feel like we have these scenarios, and the scenario itself may be simple, regardless, whatever it is. But you start adding these different things in the mix. And I think shadow's another thing, another lever that you get to kind of pull a little bit or gets pulled for you. And you're in if, for example, if we had moved things around and we'd ended the night with them looking at those bandits down at the campus at the beginning now, and now we know all about shadow and how it works, like what do they do? Because they're hurt. They got one guy wounded, can't take another wound. The other ones have definitely lost endurance, though they're not in wound territory yet, but they're hurt. They just don't have wounds. Two of them are miserable. Now you see these bandits who are unaware of you, say camped below you. You're on a ledge, and now it's like, and now you're thinking like, well, one, okay, so now you think, well, now do we have to avoid the bandits, right? Part of their whole mission was like, it seems like someone's doing bandit-like stuff here, figure out what's going on and kind of put an end to it. So it's kind of your mission brief is basically stop the bandits. At least that was kind of the opening idea of what you were going to be doing. So it's like, okay, we're supposed to stop them. They're right here. But if we just ambush them, yeah, that's the best for us health-wise, but it's not the best for our spirit. So, and I can't take I can't take much more. Like I don't want to, and I started losing more spirit, then I'm miserable. And now the rolls are maybe starting to go against me. Like it just puts a neat angle and stuff. So you can have a fairly simple a simple situation, and all these other things that are coming into it kind of tend to make it more complex in a good way. So now all these thoughts are going, oh, and I think in the future when they come across stuff, they're not going to be so easy. I think at the beginning they were like, oh yeah, we'll take a little shadow, no big deal. And then I started, I've read through more yesterday. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna start. And there's one of the creatures in here they fought that just can put shadow on you. And I actually goofed by not putting more shadow on them, but like she can really lay in the shadow. And then you're thinking like, oh my gosh. Then now you're feeling like, whoo, it's tough. So I like that because it's not damage. You're not killing them necessarily, but it hurts and it's meaningful. Crocker says, I guess discussing wandering monsters, rest, and stuff like that is also a meta discussion. Yeah, I think it's you can probably frame both of those discussions in character if you wanted to. The feeling of shadow, the weight. You can talk about because it's the I'm too old for this itch. It's like I'm tired. I'm weary again. I'm feeling that kind of despair. You could, just like you can with rests and wandering creatures, well, really the reality is that that we hear noises and things. Like I feel like the longer we stay here, the sooner someone's going to find us, which is the same way of me meta saying like I think we're going to hit a wandering encounter if we hang around here too long. One is just said in somewhat of a meta, but it does translate in a fictional thing. It's not completely meta like something else. I don't know, hit points or something where whatever it is a fiction. It is a statement of the fiction, but it's just said in meta terms. I feel the same way with the shadow stuff. You're talking about on a meta level by calling out, say if you're talking about your shadow points or shadow whatever, yeah, but it is also reflecting a fictional reality, which is that your character's getting worn down by the things they've seen. And I like that just thematically. These characters are not, it's not like D&D where you just, after first level or maybe before it was like, oh, it's a zombie. Like I see zombies all the time. It's like, no, you don't. This stuff is unnatural. Seeing a white or some kind of spirit or wretch or whatever, or some kind of zombie popping up out of the ground to tell you that, no, like and it's almost like you don't ever really get over, no, you don't. You're never just hardened to it all. It's like, if you're hardened to it all, it's because you're succumbing to shadow. You're not. It's horrible. It's something that doesn't quite compute in your brain, and it hurts. Right? To be there, it hurts in a way. And I like that. I like that it puts a different emphasis on the world. This is a world in which the kind of stuff you're fighting is unnatural. It is dark. It is evil in a way that your characters feel in different ways. So after dispatching the bandits, two of them escaped across the bridge. One of them, or they took off the ramp. So now they were trying to figure out how to get across this bridging here. There was some rope, because originally this, I think, was kind of more of, they almost say, I think originally it was set up like they had set up like a drawbridge where it had some ropes to kind of hold it, not like a suspension bridge, but I don't exactly know. I would have liked to have seen a picture of what the bridge looked like, but there were some ropes, and I forgot to mention the ropes. So I put in that there was some kind of ropes hanging around because I wanted to give them kind of all the tools. I think one of the things that, and I mentioned this yesterday, that I have to get used to, or just I have to fill in on my own, is sometimes the descriptions they give for areas, it's not like a dungeon. I mean, you can see here they give a map. So if you notice this map here, if you're looking at the page, it's got the general layout, but it's kind of hard to know what is real and kind of what's a flourish. So I'll zoom in here because this happened to me. I just forgot. I just didn't see it really. So whoops. Okay. You come across here, and they come into this room, which was a gate room, and there's a pantry. Maybe this is the pantry. I don't know. There's supposed to be a pantry, a nook in here where they kind of made a pantry, and there's this gateway that comes into this area here that's flooded, so kind of through. But they don't really the you see this where it's like, okay, this to a gateway to it, kind of an antechamber into here, but you don't get that in the actual room description, and there isn't really one. There's not anything like a box text or really, you get the dwarven gate, which is this. So if we go, here's the dwarven gate, and so here's the kind of room description. You just get, this is one of the entrances that led to the dwarven underground ruin. Men of the West made it into a guard post. Now the mostly empty room is littered by debris and refuse left by the brigands as they use it as their sleeping quarters, not daring to go deeper into the ruins. Okay. So, and then you see here, and then there's another note. Player heroes spending time here can hear the sound of dripping water and the occasional gurgling sound coming from the next chamber. The only door leading somewhere interesting is the arch gate that leads to the flooded chamber. So keep that in mind, right? Only door leading somewhere interesting. Well, the picture has two doors. In addition to the door you came in on, it's got this door down here. And I kind of forgot to mention it. But what does that mean? It's the only door to somewhere interesting. Okay, but what do we mean by interesting? Like, what does interesting mean in this context, right? Because the problem that I had to deal with was that it said that the brigands won't go past this gate. Okay. But they also say that if you don't defeat the brigands, some of them run across the bridge, and they do. They dispose of the ramp, just like what I did. And then they kind of vanish because they don't enter into the rest of it. The brigands end up becoming something that can be a pain, and I think they suggest that maybe the brigands, like more of the brigands come and they come back to their camp, find their slaughtered brethren. Then when the party tries to come out this way, the brigands are waiting for them. But it doesn't say anything about, well, what happens to the two brigands that went in? Presumably I probably should have had them have this door, and this door would kind of go down into the valley somewhere. That's probably what I should have done. I didn't. I just kind of forgot about. Actually, I think I thought like, oh, maybe that's the nook, because they don't draw the nook in anywhere, right? So you don't want to think, where's the nook? I'm like, oh, I think that must be the nook, but it also could have been the doorway, because these, and on the case of the bandits who run away, which is in the text, that's something that they would do. There's no outlet for them. So what I ended up thinking was that they actually ran through in here and then quickly went out one of these side passages, even though the text says they don't ever go past there. I'm like, oh, no, they're being chased. They feel like they're caught. They're going to run by there. And that's kind of one of these passages will kind of be the way out kind of thing. And that's the other thing. So you get in this room, and so coming into here, there's a shadow effect where you come in and it just feels the air is oppressive. You see these sarcophagi just jutting up out of the water. I didn't actually do the gurgling stuff. I had to be really still. I don't know. I just thought it was creepier where you just these, and I didn't pay. I missed this because I was reading the text instead of looking at the picture at the time. So they did. So the fact that there was this antechamber here, I just forgot about it. And I was like, oh, basically this just went right to these steps. And again, it's just one of those things that the drawing says, oh, look, there's an antechamber here, but the text doesn't say that. And it's hard to know. What is just an artistic flourish versus this should be for real. And I think the same thing with these doorways, because they don't describe any of these doorways where they go except for this one. but they just kind of like, well, they can get lost down here, and you can run into dwarves down here and everything else. So I had this fear of, oh geez, they're going to end up going down one of these other doorways. So there's I guess you would call it a scripted moment where they come in here, they're kind of in the room, and a shadowy figure kind of darts out and runs out, and then rings a bell, and then these undead things rise up out of the water. So what I had happen is, instead of them running out through one of these, I had them run up the stair to go out. Because I wanted them to be able to have somebody that they could give them some sense of direction, and I didn't want to deal with now they're just wandering down in these, they got to, because if you just take the ones that are listed, you have 1, 2, 3. So just if you take these 4 at face value and assume there's no doorways on any of these walls that we can't see because it's a perspective drawing, you think, well, there's a 1 in 4 chance they can end up going up where you really want them to go, or they just wandering down here, and there's not really any content for it. It's not, because it's not a traditional dungeon mapped wise. It's not like, oh, we got a bunch of rooms. It's literally like, oh, and then they kind of wander in the darkness, and then they can be found by dwarves, or they just get lost. And that didn't seem, they didn't really want to do that. So I tried to, as much as I could, without being like the railroad of there's only one door or something, having the figure clearly run up and out of here. I had a good sense that they were going to deal with those undead, and not knowing if it's a bandit, it doesn't end up, spoiler alert, it's actually not a bandit that did that, but thinking it is one of the escaped bandits that did that, I felt like, yeah, they're going to have a good impetus for going up the stairs and not down one of those other tunnels. And I was correct. But they did pick up a wound here. It was a fun fight. And then there's some, they opened up a couple of sarcophaguses, which gave them a couple of clues. They're empty, but I think the book just says they're empty. There are 2 sarcophagi that are basically the lord and lady of this particular, whatever this city was, or town, settlement. And I kind of just embellished a little bit just to state that, and we have a dwarf player. So one of the players playing a dwarf, I tend to be, especially here, because this was a dwarf, part of a dwarven ruin it was a dwarven holding that was abandoned, and then men came and built on top of it. So I've been giving the dwarf extra information in terms of, oh, you notice because you are a dwarf and you could notice dwarf make, so that it's just, I think it's just a nice way. And if it's something like, I think in the Shire, I would, or another kind of hobbity place, or maybe I would kind of hobbit stuff, and maybe I'll get the elf stuff, something. But it's just kind of a nice thing, like, you, because of your background or whatever, you notice this, and I'm not making them roll for anything. It's like, you notice the stuff. So 2 of the sarcophagi are of the Lord and the Lady, and I just added the detail that, yes, they're empty, which is true, but that they'd never been occupied. Like some of the other ones, they were empty, but it looks like there'd been something in there. There's some staining, something like whatever remains of whatever, and there's not in there now. Whereas the Lord and Lady, they are empty, and it doesn't look like they'd ever been in there. Like the sarcophagi were built for them, and then they were never put inside, which is true because they're elsewhere in these ruins. So I know for a fact. It's not, I'm just was taking that element. So I really want to give them this. It's a little bit of a clue of, okay, these guys are not in here, and maybe you might think that's weird. And if you think it's weird, then okay, maybe that'll give you questions or whatever that can be answered. So they dealt with so undead things come out of the water. They dealt with them at a cost. And then they made their way up the stairs here. Into this area, the accursed halls. Now, it's not super clear, but I'm pretty sure this tower maybe is the tower that's the titular tower, the star in the midst. Basically, they come out of the ground, they come out here, and they have to get over here, and it's more rubbly. The text makes it seem a lot more rubbly, a lot more covered in rubble and stuff than this. And actually, this picture makes it seem less ruined than what it seemed like it was. And maybe even they're supposed to continue on. I don't know. But I just kind of use this picture as sort of a point. And again, remember, you're getting more conceptual stuff. So if you read the description for the Cursed Halls, it says, once they get back to the surface, the player heroes emerge among a vast expanse of ruins, floating in a sea of dense mist. It is dark, regardless of the hour of the day. If morning or afternoon, the sun can be seen as a pale disk, incapable of penetrating the veil of fog. And let me see. Is there anything else? Oh yeah, and that's pretty much it, right? So then it says advancing among the roles difficult, and we get some things about that. And then we talk about that there's an exception to the everything being basically rubble, which is the Tower of the Star. So there's very little, very little things to go on. This whole space is you're like, okay, and then, so I just was thinking like, okay, there's all this rubble, then there's kind of maybe a clear sort of courtyard area, and there's this tower, and I kind of made it. I talked about how the tower looked like maybe been part of, building a hall or something, a larger structure that had just collapsed, and now all there is kind of a couple of right angles in this tower coming up, but the tower is where this purple light is coming from. So they started talking about it, and I mentioned that the mist, this mist that seems to be just surrounding them and in this kind of, and again oppressing them in this space. And it was late. I think I knew, I said it was late afternoon, so I used that kind of that imagery they talked about in the text of the pale disk or the sun. Everything seems just obscured and hazy. And then what ended up being a pretty cool moment was there's the lady. So remember I mentioned there's a lord and a lady who were not buried in these sepulchers that were set for them, and the lady's been turned into a wraith, and she's wandering around the city, and the ruins, I should say, the ruins of the city, and she's got a she's kind of all hunched over, and she's just impossibly old, and there's little wisps of white hair, and she's wearing kind of a cloak, or the remains of one, and she's got a spear in one hand and a sword in another. And so I just imagined her sort of using the spear as a staff or a walking stick. And I talk about the first thing as they're kind of discussing what to do, looking over these ruins, as they hear sort of echoing like a thunk and a thunk, the sound of like a thonking of something on stone, and then this like metal being dragged, and then she comes into view, and she's all hunched over, and the sword is all pitted and rusted. Pitted is a word that they use in the description, which I really liked, so I just was using that. And they even call it, her combat proceeds, the pitted blade, this rusted pitted sword she's dragging, sparks are coming off of it. It's kind of, and she kind of gets close, and they gave her a little bit of text where she says, why have you come? There's nothing here, only death. Leave this place or join me in my torment. And so I read out, those lines, and they were like holding fast. And then she came in and put the whooping on them. I mean, actually, no, I shouldn't say that. They actually were close to downing her, but so one thing that's cool, and I hadn't gotten to use before, is enemies have hate. So heroes have hope. They spend hope to do stuff. Enemies have hate, and she's got 5 hate that she can do to do things. And you know what? I didn't even look at her parry. She might have taken more damage because I wasn't counting her parry. I forgot about that. But she can use her hate. And so one thing that happens is that the first round of combat, the players go first. And they were I think they were in forward stance, which means that they're getting extra dice to hit with. It also means that she gets extra dice. But as they go first, I think maybe it's a good, I don't know what the overall strategy is, but it seems like a pretty good strategy in that first round. You're going first, get all the dice you can. Maybe you can knock the thing out before it even has a chance to come back on you. And especially if with those extra dice, maybe you can get a couple of wounds if you're lucky. If not, you can get some, what do they call it, heavy blows that essentially are really force multipliers, because your weapons don't do a lot of damage. But what happens is you're rolling your D12, and then you got all those 6-sided dice. And as you're using hope, you're getting extra dice. You're getting dice for your skill, which when those dice roll up 6s, they allow you to do special things. And one of the things they allow you to do is add your strength to your damage. So you starting off doing 3, but you have strength 5, now suddenly doing 8 points of damage. And, I think you can even stack those. So you can do a bunch of damage if you're lucky. So yeah, I could say, hey, let's come in hot. Let's get some extra dice. Let's go. And they did. They whomped her down, got her down to 9. And I think her endurance went from 24 to 9. And I was like, whew. But then I had her spend a hate to do this. What is her thing? I think I used Thing of Terror, but I think I must, I think I might have goofed, because I was using this repeatedly, and it says at the first round. Is that different from mine? That's funny, because I might have made a mistake. But I used this Thing of Terror at the start of the first round of battle. All player heroes in sight of one or more creatures with this ability gain 3 points of dread. I wonder if they changed this, because I could have sworn in the copy that's in my book, I thought she could spend her hate to do that. Yeah. Wow. Okay. That's interesting. Wait, is this am I looking at the right creature? I think I am. Yeah, I am. So my book is, I think, a different printing. My physical book is a different printing to the PDF. The PDF is newer. So the PDF's abilities say deathless, spend 1 hate to cancel a wound. When attack inflicts damage to that creature that would cause it to go 0 endurance, spend 1 hate to bring the creature back to full endurance instead. This ability is ineffective against player heroes wielding a magical weapon enchanted with spells for the Bane of Undead. That's not, so here's what the other one has. So the other, the original one has Unliving, spend 1 hate to cancel a wound or to cancel damage that would bring L1 to 0 endurance. Additionally, she's not affected by immediate intimidate foe unless a magical success is obtained. So it's kind of really different. This one is, so my reading of this is she can cancel out attack. She can cancel out damage that would bring her back to 0, but not bring her up to full, which is what this one has. So that's different. Krako says books never lie, parenthetically sometimes. Yeah. Then she's got an ability in the book that says in the book that's called Unliving. And here they call it Deathless. In the PDF they talk about Denizen of the Dark, which is called the same thing. So those two track. Okay, so they split out the Intimidate stuff to Heartless. So whereas that was under Unliving, now they've broken that into a different thing called Heartless. But in the book, it says Strike Fear. You can spend 1 hate to make all player heroes inside gain 3 points of Shadow. Dread. And those who fail lose themselves in the fog. So interestingly, they no longer, that's gone. So she can't spam it. So I was spamming that to, frankly, glee on my part, and I thought good effect, because it really put the fear, because they're like, oh my gosh, because she has 5. I think she has, actually, did they give her more? Hold on a minute. Does she have 5 in here? I thought maybe she has less. Give me. Yeah, oh no, she has 5 hate. So yeah, so she has a bunch of hate. So I was like, ooh, she is just dropping fear bombs on them all the time. But now I'm noticing that they changed it, and so I'm guessing that maybe that was too strong, because 3 shadow is a lot. Now, granted, you can make a shadow test, and the first time she used that ability, the dwarf character made their shadow test with extra successes, so they took no dread. But the other ones took at least 2. They're like 2 or 3. And I was able to hit that, I think, twice. And I meant to hit it a 3rd time, and I just forgot to do it. But they also took away this part of it in the book version, which I understand why they got rid of, because it's a weird thing. It says if you fail your roll to resist the shadow, you're lost in the fog. And you're thinking to yourself, well, what does that mean? And what happened is in the second round of combat, they rolled poorly. She still only had 9 hit points, because I wasn't using this version of the Deathless thing. So she was at 9 hit points. She actually would have gone down, but I used 1 hate point to take that wound away. And then the next round, they rolled really poorly, and she did that. She spent another hate to do that to put that shadow on them, and all 3 of them failed. So they all picked up 3 shadow, and they all were, I called it befogged, which made sense. But then it's like, well, what do I do? Like, what do you do with it? Like, they were wondering, like, can we see each other? I'm like, no, you just see kind of fog. So I really wanted it. So this could have been a TPK. Like, I could have been like, okay, she just, she has some more. I could have been like, well, I'm just going to roll max damage on you or pierce. I could have done a bunch of things to make it really. But instead, what I did was I had this. When you defeat her, you're supposed to get a vision of her kind of in her full glory, and then she screams at you. And so I had that where in the fog, they just saw her coming out in her full glory and screaming, and then she's gone. But the idea was that she was kind of come back. But what I wanted to do, and I should have hit them with one more shadow bomb, which is what I was thinking I was going to do, and I just forgot to do it. So I meant to hit them with another shadow bomb and then leave, and then she would come back and she'd be at full again. But it does give them a chance to undo the curse, and I felt like it was appropriate. I was like, I really wanted to mess with the shadows, though. I didn't want to just kill them, or I really wanted to get them dealing with shadow. So that's what happened. They all got befogged in round 2. I kind of like the fogging thing. I just think that you have to get, I mean, obviously I came up with something to do, but it's a weird thing because it just seems like when they wrote that originally, it said like, oh, they're lost in the fog. It's like, okay, great. But what happens if everybody's lost in the fog? Or really, what does being lost in the fog mean? In the first round, one character got lost in the fog, and the other 2 players were wondering, well, what does that look like? What does that look like to us? And I suppose I could have done the story gaming thing and said, what does it look like to you? But I was just kind of like that they can't. I was just, the way I described it was that they just eyes kind of lose focus, and they're suddenly kind of looking around. And they don't seem to be able to make contact with you. Like they just seem sort of out of it. It's how I kind of played it up. But it's one of those things that it's a cool effect, but what does it mean? What does it do? And then what do you do if everybody's lost in the fog? Because if it is literally you were lost in the fog, like you're in some kind of demi-plane of fog for a round, then all 3 of you go out, then everyone just takes a turn. I don't know. Like, what do you do? Or is it like, oh, great, it's just coup de grace time or just max damage time or everyone takes a piercing blow time? I'm not sure. So I can see why maybe they felt like, man, that's pretty strong. And it's if unless we're going to write up a bunch of stuff on how to play that, if everybody gets lost in the fog, then maybe it's easiest. Maybe it's best we don't do that. But it was a nice touch. And thematically, I like the fog because it kind of puts the fog. I mean, the fog is already ominous. The fact that it's there, the fact that it doesn't seem natural, but I think it just would have put a little extra oomph on the fog of this kind of like lost in the fog thing. But it's a little bit underbaked as a thing. So I guess I'm not ultimately surprised that they engineered it, and probably thinking about it, the fact is that she's got 5 hate, and if it's a long combat and the players are unlucky, they could be taking 15 shadow. If they don't do enough to the lady to really put a dent in her where she's got to use her hate, then she could just use that every round, which I was gonna do. I was like, oh yeah, like she's hitting it. That might not be again as intended. They probably thought that you'd be using other things, but it's like, no, she's just gonna keep whapping. So that's interesting. Croco says, looks like the movie The Mist. Maybe. So then she disappears. They come out of the mist and they see the tower, and they do say that when she's defeated, and I just use that here, that the light from the top of the tower intensifies. So this was a cool. Well, was one moment I missed. So before they got up here, they're wounded. They just defeat they'd feed the undead in the flooded chamber. The Hobbit has some like drink that he has with him, and it's meant for social situations. It has a mechanic ability in a social situation. Like it can help, I think, during a council or something where you could be like, oh, have a drink of this ale. And it was really funny because he mentioned having it, just wanted to use it as like a moment of fellowship. And one of the other players was kind of begging, like, oh, can we lose a shadow point? And I like that. I love that stuff, but I don't want to be like, nah, you're not losing shadow points. Like, I don't want to do that. But what I did do is one of the things that as resource they have is these fellowship points, which is it's like a group amount of points you get at the beginning of every session. It's a group pool. I think they have 4, and it can do some really powerful stuff, but everybody's sharing from that one pool. So it's 4 they can use. So I think they'd already used up all their, and it was funny. We only remembered about it halfway through the session. And then for that halfway point, they'd spent it all because was getting desperate, which I like. They were like, oh gosh, I got to spend hope. Oh, I got to do this. I got to take a shadow scar. We got to use fellowship. Like they were really using those resources. So when he took out doing this thing with the drink, like having this kind of quiet moment after the fight with the swamp, the kind of water dead people, and they pulled the drink, I was like, okay, I'll give you back. You have a fellowship. It seemed like you're doing a fellowship thing. Like, I'll give you you get an extra. I'll give you a fellowship point. But what was really funny is the guy who's hosting, had this root alcohol, is like a vodka, so similar to vodka, distilled liquor, but made from different root vegetables, not potatoes. And so we actually gave everybody, I don't drink, so I didn't drink one, but gave everybody a shot, and they all did a shot of this like root liquor is sort of a stand-in, in the game for their characters taking this kind of Hobbit draft to drink, which was really a fun, kind of nice moment. In any case, the lady disappears. So through there, the lady disappears. They see the tower, the light, they go up. There's graffiti on the door of the tower. They all read it. So they picked up another shadow, which is by the book, but they does kind of give them some of the backstory of the Witch King cursing the place and tearing it down and doing horrible things. Then the dwarf stood guard at the bottom of the tower, and then I started. He's down there. I'm telling him like he's starting to hear the lady coming back again, like she's back. The thunk and and he can't see her yet because there's all kinds of rubble and stuff, but he can hear her coming closer. So I was trying to put a little bit of a clock on them, but there's I don't know, I want to say it's maybe a missed opportunity for something because there's no danger at the top of the tower. It's almost inviting. The only really issue is if you have kind of a OSR style analysis paralysis where you basically have a very simple situation. When you get to the top chamber of the tower, there's a decrepit throne, and this poor guy is mummified in the throne, and he's got this crown on his head. The crown's been actually nailed into his head, and there's a gem in the crown, and it's the gem that's letting out this light. There's nothing there. There's no enemies. There's no traps. There's no nothing. All you have to do is just take the crown off the head, and just pry it off, right? But of course, it is asking you to start getting overly like, oh, so you could see some parties starting to figure out like, you just get really deep into like what's going on, like what am I missing, like where's the trap, like where's the thing going to come, is it going to raise out of the chair, all this kind of stuff. So I did appreciate having that taken clock. They didn't really need it, but then the other thing that happened was that they got kind of really into sort of trying to like assuage this undead or the dead. So they made a point of bowing to the king, and the hobbit said these words like, oh, king, we're here to try to help you and undo this curse, whatever, which I thought was really cool. And then the elf who'd gone up there also decides to sing this like funeral dirge, and he rolled really well on his whatever I don't know, singing or performance or whatever it was. So I actually had the voice, this beautiful voice of the elf just sort of seems to resonate and kind of out from the tower over the courtyard, and the dwarf is there. He's got wielding a mattock, and got mattock in the doorway, and he's starting to see the lady kind of come out, like her decrepit lady come out towards him, and then she's just kind of like caught in the music, like in this kind of reverie, like some kind of memory of old sort of thing. Yeah, Croco says skeletons on thrones not rising, unheard of. Exactly. And then after they'd done that, and the elf is singing, they took the crown off, and that ended the curse. The lady kind of disappears, and they regrouped down in at the bottom of the tower. And then there's some notes in here about, I mentioned that there are some other passages that go through the underground, and that there are dwarves that are still kind of living down there. Some remnant of some dwarves who I think were exiled. And it's actually one of those dwarves who rang the bell, who caused those undead in the flooded room to pop off, not the bandits. And so the last thing, the kind of cliffhanger I left them on was that as they're kind of walking back along these ruins, the dwarf kind of comes out and he's holding a bell, and he says, I think I had some lines of like, oh, you were, good, or you were doers of good, like perhaps we can help each other, and they're all like, what, this is the guy that rang the bell, like, and everything. And I also know that dwarf player is really into doing like dwarf stuff. So I know he's going to be really keen to get into these people, but that's where we ended. So I can't imagine as much more. The one thing I'm looking forward to is they have a note in the scenario about having them do a council when they go to meet with the leader of these dwarves, that they can we can do one of those council mechanics, the council procedures. So I'm definitely going to run a council with that. And then probably it'll be from there, it'll be just wrapping up. Nice things is now I've got this enemy that can pop back, because there are those two bandits unaccounted for. I think I'm going to have the dwarf name him just so I can have they can know a name, and I can kind of play around with the name. So they're going to have that as a thread to further adventures when that guy escaped. I'm assuming that guy escaped, went down some side, a side passage that they know leads out, or at least he knows leads out, somehow gets out. Maybe they even have a deal with those dwarves. Not that the dwarves feel kind of trapped. From what I read, if I'm recalling correctly, the dwarves, they got these things up here flooded, and the undead in here, and they just kind of feel like they're sort of trapped. And I feel like maybe the bandits maybe have been taking advantage of the fact that these dwarves are sort of in a kind of a pitiful state, and sort of can't really, are kind of hard pressed, and so it can kind of get them to move. So, but now that might change. Now the party, depending on what the party do, assuming they don't kill them, because they're kind of pissed about having undead unleashed upon them, which I can understand. But they'll have a chance to maybe make a deal or do something, and then they'll get out and presumably that'll be just the unless I have some kind of final bandit showdown. We'll see. I don't know. I got to think about how I want to do things mechanically with if I'm going to have like the bandits show up. Because they do mention like, oh, the bandits could show up when they're on their way out. Well, yeah, they could, but I think I'm going to have the dwarves lead them to another way. But maybe there'll be something, depending on their decisions or something, well, they'll see that the bandits are out there still. Something like that. So I want them to have the victory, like they did drive the bandits out of this place, and maybe, and they did solve the curse, which may mean that maybe the dwarves can take over, which would put it back in dwarven hands and presumably keep it out of the bandits' hands. So it will deny the bandits this this base, but there's still going to be bandits at large, and the bandit leader guy is still going to be at large. But it was a fun time, and I think the players remarked as we were walking out, they really liked that it felt like I think they really felt like the combat and stuff was, everything felt kind of meaningful. Or I think, I'm trying to remember what they were saying. I don't remember their exact words, but I know they were talking about, I think they felt like there was, like they didn't feel like they, I think everything felt like it had kind of an importance. Like picking your stances kind of mattered, especially when they started getting hurt. You couldn't just go, oh, I'm just going to go forward, because then if you don't take care of that thing, it gets a shot at you, and it gets the same stance as you do. So you take that extra die to go on offense. Whoever you're fighting gets that extra die to go on offense against you. So it was very much like, yeah, you're getting this extra thing, but if you don't take care of business, there's a chance it might come back around on you. I think they really liked the atmosphere. I think they really liked the shadow coming in, and now they're feeling that dance of, oh, what do we do? I got to read up on the shadow scars, but the elf took a shadow scar because he was saying that the elves, they heal shadow very slowly. So for him, it made more sense, instead of accumulating a bunch of shadow, just to take the scar. I got to read up on how the scars work, but he was like, yeah, for me, it makes more sense to take the scar because this, that, and the other. I was like, okay, go ahead and take the scar, if you want to. But I don't know I got to read what the implications are of those scars and what they do again. But I kind of like that stuff. Hey, the Hobbit's got a wound, so you might be great, but you might get one more, just one of those piercing blows, and you could be toast, or at least dying. So he's kind of in an off spot. He's got some hit points left, but he's got that vulnerability, and you don't know when that vulnerability is going to kick in. It could never kick in. It could kick in on the next thing. And the wound doesn't impact you in your rolls or anything, so you're still kind of good to go. But you've got this kind of vulnerability that you didn't have before. So fun times. I really do like the way the game plays in terms of the player-facing roles. We did run into one. I know people have mentioned this before, and this is one of those things also where you're reading through rules. You're reading through these books. It's like, oh, and everything seems clear. And then sometimes you get into play where it's like, it's not clear. And this happened before with using the specialty dice and how the specialty die worked. And yes, it is written, but sometimes it can be easy to miss what's written. And depending on how it's referenced, it can be hard to find in an index or even a table of contents. You're trying to find stuff. And what we ran into was these shadow tests. Because I was just giving out shadow. And then I was trying to read up on it. I was like, oh, they should be making tests. So like, okay, you got to make a test. But then what are you testing against? And so it's some kind of number, but what's the number? And it turns out that depending on the type of shadow, whether it's sorcery or it's dread, or there's another one, it can be heart or valor, I think, and those set the numbers. But where that is in the books, it's not next to the other shadow stuff. So it was a lot of, and I actually had to go onto my tablet and do an internet, I had to do a search engine thing of like, what do you test for, shadow test One Ring. And then I found somebody basically asking the same question in a Reddit post, and somebody responded with what you needed to test against, and then the book references, and the book references weren't in the shadow section. It's like, why, if you're going to have it, at least have in two sections, like just, and I know people talked about that before with other free books, but now I've run into it a couple times. Like, yeah, some of those things I just wish, like, man, they could probably organize that a little bit better. And this is the second printing on the PDF. So I was like, hey, it would have been nice if because it just, especially just to say like test against valor, test against heart, it doesn't take up a lot of text. Like you could fit that in, I don't think, without having to retypeset a whole bunch of stuff. It's just help us out, or put a page reference in parentheses, see page, whatever, something so that we can find it. Cause it was kind of hard to find in we're all good sports. We're all good natured about it because we're all trying to learn the game. But it's something that ideally I'd like to not have to stop. And I mean, in other situations I wouldn't, but in this case, because the roles have these target numbers that are set per character, they're not set by me. I don't say this is a DC 12. Like, no, it's kind of set by your sheet. I could wing a number, but it might be making it, you're not really, the game doesn't want you to do that. The game has numbers. Use those numbers, right? And if I set a number that's high and a character naturally had a better number, I wouldn't know, we would have missed it. Or if it's just, we need those are kind of one of the core things you need. You kind of like, if there are some core things you need to remember, the biggest one is what each test you're doing, what the target numbers are. And that was a little bit like, I not seeing it. I couldn't find it, but we ended up figuring it. It wasn't that big a deal. And now we'll remember. I should probably write it down too, but we should remember that. But that was a little bit like, oh, where is it in the book? And it was hard to find. But other than that, I really like the way it's a fun game. It runs pretty smoothly. Again, once you know your target number stuff, I do kind of like the player facing roles. It's an interesting way of doing it. It's a little bit, it's kind of funny because when you're playing an OSR type game, there's a bunch of those rolls that are basically rolling against the world. Like, oh, you have a 2 in 6 chance of getting lost in the woods. And it doesn't matter which woods, doesn't matter who you are. You could be Aragorn, you could be a nobody, right? It doesn't matter. You could be the best ranger in the world, the best whatever. You have a 2 in 6 chance of getting lost in the woods. Like, okay. And you just roll at 2 in 6 chance. And that's it. And what you lose in that bit of specificity or bit of being able to engineer and say, oh, for you, it's easier or whatever. And of course you can do things like roll it with advantage or do whatever, but just playing by the book. It's like, okay, here it's the same sort of thing, only it's player based instead of world based. And I'm fine with it because that allows the players to be able to roll their dice and let me know if they succeed or not, and do stuff as opposed to me having to check against numbers. So it's a little bit faster. And that's why the parry thing, I wish they'd done a little bit differently, and I still might tweak that. I'm not ready to yet. But I like the idea of it being all player-faced, where they can just tell me, hey, I hit or not, or I missed or not, and I don't have to finagle the numbers. It's just a nicer it's a nice flow for that. I'm not saying you should do that for every game, though. Like I said, I'm fine with it with the world part, and I don't see why. I don't really see any reason why, other than the fact that in the same way, it's like every woods are the same. Like, it doesn't matter how good I am. I'm still like 2 in 6. It's like, yep, this is the other thing. It's like, well, it doesn't matter who I'm fighting against. That's always like a 14 for me to hit. It's like, yep. But there are other things that enemies have. You're just, the mechanics of everything are just, that strength of your enemy is just calculated in a different way, just not in that to hit number. I will have more to say and whatnot. And, I have to finish this scenario, so I might work on it later on in the week. We shall see. But yeah, it was a really fun session. Everyone's really vibing with it. Everyone's really enjoying with it. I think the folks like the mechanics. That's another nice thing. I think one of the things we were testing out was like, do we like these mechanics? I think the answer is yeah, we like these mechanics. I think it definitely works for this kind of game. Still maybe a little bit of TBD on journeys, but we'll see how that plays out when we do more journeys. But they worked, they worked. I know they didn't do anything poorly. I think I'll have to see how I vibe with them and whether we kind of get, because I do want to I don't want everything just to be like a skill challenge for travel. I'd like there to be more interaction in there, but so I got to see kind of what I want to do, how things feel. But I've only done one, so I'm not going to say like, I got to make all these changes after running one journey. So we'll definitely see about that. But in terms of running through this kind of scenario, yeah, it worked great. Your mileage may vary in terms of the kind of, at least the way it's in this book, the way they're just vague in some ways, and you just got to get in with dealing with that. There's other stuff they don't seem to cover. I couldn't find anything on torches. They're like, who's carrying the torch? How many torches do we have? And I'm like, I don't think the game cares. There's definitely some things in here about it. Like when fighting the undead, who's got the torch is important in terms of the undead because they don't like the light, the fire anyway. But other than that, it's like, I don't know. So certainly the torch could go out and that could have an effect or whatever, but they're not concerned about tracking torches or how long they last or anything like that. That's not really where this game is coming at least so it seems to me. Now, maybe someone will send me a comment saying, oh, you got to look on this page. It's all about torches. Okay, fair enough. But we couldn't find anything and we were worried about it. We was like, okay, the hobbits carried the torch. Like, okay, great. But yeah, it was really good. I'm really pleased with how it ran. And I feel like I can run. I feel like I'm getting to that point again. not remembering or not knowing particular rules, but I think in the general flow of it, I'm getting there, and the sessions are good, and that's the most important thing. We're all having fun, and everyone's looking forward to seeing what comes next. So can't ask for more than that. Um, with all that said, I'm going to let you go, folks. Have a great rest of your day, night, or whenever you end up watching or listening to this. Game on, everybody, and I'll talk to you later. Bye now.